What happens when one of Hollywood's most beloved comedy stars completely loses it on live television? What happens when years of built-up frustration finally explode in front of millions of viewers? Tonight, we're diving deep into the most shocking celebrity meltdown in late-night television history, a clash so intense that security had to be called, cameras kept rolling, and an A-list actor was physically escorted from the studio. Before we get into this wild story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, telling me which celebrity clash you want to see covered next. The Jimmy Kimmel Live studio was buzzing with its usual pre-show energy. Staff members scurried around making final adjustments to lighting and sound equipment, while the studio audience settled into their seats, completely unaware they were about to witness television history in the making. Jimmy Kimmel himself was going through his typical pre-show routine, reviewing his notes one final time, and chatting casually with his production team about the evening's lineup of guests. Jack Black was scheduled as the lead guest that night, promoting his latest film project. On paper, it seemed like the perfect match. A charismatic entertainer known for his high-energy performances paired with a seasoned late-night host, famous for his quick wit and easygoing interview style. The two had crossed paths numerous times over the years at industry events, always maintaining a professional, if somewhat distant, relationship. But there were underlying tensions that most people in the entertainment industry were aware of, simmering issues that had been building for months beneath the surface of Hollywood's polished exterior. Jack had been growing increasingly frustrated with what he perceived as the superficial nature of late-night television promotion tours. He'd been vocal in private conversations about feeling like a performing monkey, forced to do the same rehearsed bits and tell the same rehearsed stories night after night to sell whatever project the studio wanted to push. Meanwhile, Jimmy had his own concerns about difficult guests who thought they were above the format of his show. He dealt with plenty of celebrities who came on thinking they could hijack his program for their own agenda, and he developed a reputation for firmly but politely keeping interviews on track. The stage was set for a collision between two strong personalities, each carrying their own baggage and expectations. As Jack made his way to the studio that evening, witnesses later reported that he seemed unusually tense. Gone was his typical jovial demeanor and infectious smile that fans had come to expect. Instead, he appeared focused, almost stern, like a man preparing for battle rather than a friendly chat show appearance. His usual entourage of assistants and publicists noticed the change in his mood but attributed it to pre-interview nerves, something even seasoned performers occasionally experienced. The show's opening monologue went off without a hitch. Jimmy delivered his jokes with his characteristic timing, getting solid laughs from the studio audience. But backstage, Jack was pacing in his dressing room, his energy building to an almost explosive level. When a production assistant knocked on his door to let him know it was almost time for his segment, Jack's response was sharp and dismissive, a far cry from his usual friendly interactions with crew members. As the commercial break ended and Jimmy prepared to introduce his first guest, the atmosphere in the studio shifted. There was an electricity in the air, a tension that seemed to radiate from backstage. Jimmy launched into his introduction with his usual enthusiasm, praising Jack's latest work and highlighting his impressive career achievements. The studio audience applauded warmly as Jack emerged from behind the curtain, but those paying close attention could see something was different about his usual entrance. Instead of his typical energetic wave and broad smile, Jack's expression was serious, almost calculating. He acknowledged the audience with a brief nod, but his eyes remained fixed on Jimmy as he made his way to the guest chair. The handshake between host and guest was cordial but noticeably brief, lacking the warmth that usually characterized such interactions on the show. Jimmy opened with what should have been a softball question about Jack's new movie, expecting the kind of enthusiastic response that had made Jack such a popular talk show guest over the years. But instead of launching into his prepared talking points, Jack paused for a long moment, his expression growing even more serious. "You know what, Jimmy?" Jack began, his voice carrying an edge that immediately caught everyone's attention. "I think we need to talk about something else first." The studio audience, sensing something unusual was happening, fell into an expectant silence. Jimmy, caught off guard by the unexpected direction, tried to maintain his professional composure while quickly assessing the situation. "Oh, okay," Jimmy replied with a nervous laugh. "What's on your mind?" But even as he asked the question, he could see in Jack's eyes that whatever was coming wasn't going to be the light-hearted banter that his show was known for. Jack leaned forward in his chair, his posture becoming more aggressive as he locked eyes with Jimmy. "I'm tired of this whole charade," he said, his voice rising slightly. "I'm tired of coming on these shows and pretending like everything is wonderful, when the truth is, this entire industry is built on lies and manipulation." The words hung in the air like a challenge, and Jimmy realized that his carefully planned interview had just gone completely off the rails. The cameras continued rolling as tension filled the studio, and what had started as a routine celebrity appearance was about to become something much more explosive. Jimmy's smile faltered for just a moment before his years of experience kicked in. He'd handled difficult situations before, but never quite like this. "Jack, I think maybe we should focus on your new film," he said, attempting to steer the conversation back to safer territory. "The audience is here to have a good time," but Jack wasn't having it. He shook his head vigorously, his famous curly hair bouncing as his frustration became more visible. "No, Jimmy, that's exactly the problem. Everyone wants to have a good time while ignoring the real issues. Do you know what it's like to be reduced to a caricature of yourself? To have every interviewer ask you the same recycled questions about your weight, your voice, your energy level?" The studio audience was now completely silent, sensing that they were witnessing something unprecedented. Camera operators instinctively tightened their shots, knowing they were capturing television gold, even if it was uncomfortable to watch. Jimmy tried to regain control, his voice taking on a slightly firmer tone. "Jack, I understand you might have some frustrations with the industry, but this isn't really the appropriate venue to air those grievances. We have a show to do." That was exactly the wrong thing to say. Jack's eyes flashed with anger as he stood up from his chair, towering over Jimmy, who remained seated behind his desk. "Appropriate venue?" Jack's voice boomed across the studio. "You mean I should keep quiet and play along with your little game? Smile for the cameras and pretend everything is perfect?" "I'm not asking you to pretend anything," Jimmy replied, his own frustration starting to show through his professional demeanor. "I'm asking you to be respectful to our audience and our show." Jack let out a harsh laugh that echoed through the studio. "Respectful? You want to talk about respect? How about the respect you show your guests when you book them on your show just to make fun of them? How about the respect you show when you reduce accomplished actors to punchlines for your monologue?" The accusation hung in the air like a bomb that had just exploded. Jimmy's face flushed red, and for the first time in years, he found himself genuinely speechless on his own show. The production team in the control room was frantically discussing whether to cut to commercial, but the sheer drama of the moment kept them rolling. "That's completely unfair," Jimmy finally managed, his voice now carrying real anger. "I've never disrespected you or any other guest on this show. If you have a problem with late-night television, maybe you shouldn't have agreed to come on." Jack stepped closer to Jimmy's desk, his presence now genuinely intimidating. "Maybe I shouldn't have. Maybe none of us should keep participating in this circus. Do you know what you said about me in your monologue 3 months ago? Do you remember the joke you made at my expense?" Jimmy's mind raced, trying to recall the specific joke Jack was referring to. But the truth was, he'd made countless jokes about countless celebrities over the years. It was part of the job, part of what late-night hosts had always done. "Jack, I make jokes about everyone, including myself. It's comedy. It's not personal." "Not personal?" Jack's voice cracked with emotion. "You made a joke about my marriage, about my personal life, and you're telling me it's not personal? You took something private and turned it into a punchline for millions of people." The studio audience was now visibly uncomfortable. Some people, shifting in their seats, others looking around nervously as if expecting security to intervene at any moment. This had gone far beyond awkward television into genuinely disturbing territory. Jimmy stood up behind his desk, matching Jack's aggressive posture. "If you had a problem with a specific joke, you should have called my people. You don't ambush someone on live television." "Ambush?" Jack laughed bitterly. "You think this is an ambush? You've been ambushing guests for years with your so-called comedy. At least I'm being honest about what I'm doing." The tension in the studio was now palpable. Crew members were exchanging worried glances, and several production assistants had quietly positioned themselves near the stage area, ready to intervene if the situation escalated further. Jimmy's patience was wearing thin. Years of dealing with celebrity egos and maintaining his composure were being tested to their absolute limit. "Jack, you're being completely unreasonable. If you can't conduct yourself professionally, maybe you should leave." Those words were like throwing gasoline on a fire. Jack's face contorted with rage as he slammed his hand down on Jimmy's desk with a force that made the coffee mug jump and spill its contents across the surface. "Professional?" Jack shouted, his voice now echoing throughout the studio. "You want to lecture me about being professional? You make your living by tearing people down, by making audiences laugh at other people's expense, and you want to talk to me about professionalism?" Jimmy stepped back slightly, genuinely startled by the physical aggression. "You need to calm down right now, or I'm going to have security remove you." "Go ahead," Jack challenged, spreading his arms wide in a gesture of defiance. "Call security. Show your audience what happens when someone tells the truth on your show. Show them how you handle anyone who doesn't play by your rules." The standoff between the two men was electric with tension. Jimmy reached for the phone on his desk, his hand trembling slightly with a mixture of anger and adrenaline. "I'm serious, Jack. Calm down, or you're gone." But Jack was beyond reasoning now. His frustrations with the entertainment industry, with late-night television, with the whole system that had made him famous but left him feeling empty, came pouring out in a torrent of raw emotion. "You know what the real joke is, Jimmy? The real joke is that we're all trapped in this system together. You think you're in control because you're behind that desk, but you're just as much a prisoner as the rest of us. At least I'm admitting it." The words hit Jimmy harder than any physical blow could have. There was truth in Jack's accusation that cut through all the anger and drama of the moment. For just an instant, Jimmy's professional mask slipped, and the audience could see the uncertainty and doubt in his eyes. That moment of vulnerability in Jimmy's eyes was all Jack needed to see. He pressed his advantage, sensing that he'd finally broken through the host's carefully constructed television persona. "You feel it too, don't you, Jimmy? The emptiness of it all? The way we're all just dancing for the cameras, saying what we're supposed to say, being what we're supposed to be?" Jimmy's hand hovered over the phone, torn between his professional obligations and the uncomfortable truth in Jack's words. The studio audience watched in stunned silence as their familiar late-night host struggled to maintain his composure. "This isn't about me," Jimmy said quietly, his voice lacking its usual confidence. "This is about you having some kind of breakdown on my show." Jack's laugh was hollow and bitter. "Breakdown? Maybe. Or maybe this is the first honest moment that's ever happened on this stage. When was the last time you had a real conversation with someone, Jimmy? Not an interview, not a promotional segment, but an actual human conversation." The question hung in the air between them, and for a moment, the hostility seemed to ebb. But then Jimmy's producer's voice crackled through his earpiece, reminding him of his responsibilities, of the show that needed to continue, of the commercial breaks and sponsors who were depending on him. Jimmy straightened up, his professional mask sliding back into place. "Jack, I'm going to ask you one more time to sit down and either do the interview or leave peacefully." But Jack wasn't finished. He turned to face the studio audience directly, his voice carrying across the space with theatrical projection. Do you people understand what you're watching here? Do you realize that everything you see on these shows is carefully scripted, carefully managed, carefully designed to sell you something? Several audience members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't what they'd come to see. They wanted jokes, celebrity gossip, maybe a funny game or two. Instead, they were getting an uncomfortable dose of reality that many of them weren't prepared to handle. Jimmy moved around his desk, approaching Jack with his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Jack, you're scaring the audience. These people came here to have a good time." "Scaring them?" Jack whirled back to face Jimmy, his eyes blazing with intensity. "Good. Maybe they should be scared. Maybe we all should be scared of what we've become, of what this industry has turned us into." The confrontation had now moved beyond a simple disagreement between host and guest. It had become something primal, a clash between two different philosophies about entertainment, celebrity, and the responsibility that comes with fame. Jimmy's patience finally snapped completely. "That's enough," he said, reaching for his phone with decisive movement. "Security to the stage now." Jack watched Jimmy make the call with something that looked almost like satisfaction. "There it is," he said, nodding as if Jimmy had just proven his point. "The moment someone tells the truth, you silence them. You throw them out. You protect the system at all costs." Within seconds, two large security guards appeared from the wings, moving quickly but cautiously toward the two men. The lead guard, a professional who had dealt with countless situations over the years, approached with his hands visible and his voice calm. "Sir, we need you to come with us," he said to Jack, maintaining a respectful but firm tone. Jack looked at the security guards, then back at Jimmy, then out at the studio audience. For a moment it seemed like he might resist, might escalate the situation even further. The tension in the room was suffocating as everyone waited to see what would happen next. "You know what the saddest part is?" Jack said, his voice now quiet but carrying clearly through the studio's sound system. "I actually used to respect you, Jimmy. I thought you were different from the others. I thought you cared about more than just ratings and celebrity gossip." Jimmy's face was flushed with anger and embarrassment. "I do care about more than that, but I also care about my show, my audience, and my crew. And right now, you're putting all of that at risk." "Your show," Jack repeated with disgust. "Your audience, your crew. It's all about ownership with you. People, isn't it? Well, you can't own me, Jimmy. You can throw me out, but you can't own me." The security guards moved closer, and Jack finally seemed to accept that his time on the stage was over. But he wasn't going to go quietly. "Before I leave," Jack announced to the studio audience, "I want you to think about something. How many of your favorite celebrities do you think are genuinely happy? How many of them do you think go home at night and feel fulfilled by the work they're doing?" Several audience members were now looking distinctly uncomfortable, some avoiding eye contact with Jack entirely. This wasn't the light entertainment they'd expected when they'd gotten tickets to the show. Jimmy stepped forward, his voice carrying both authority and desperation. "Jack, you've made your point. Now please leave with dignity." "Dignity?" Jack's voice rose again as the security guards flanked him on either side. "You want to talk about dignity? There's no dignity in any of this, Jimmy. There's no dignity in pretending to be friends with people you barely know. There's no dignity in reducing human beings to punchlines for your monologue." As the security guards began to gently but firmly guide Jack toward the exit, he continued his tirade, his voice carrying even as he was being removed from the stage. "This whole system is broken," he called out, his words echoing through the studio. "And all of you are complicit in keeping it that way. The hosts, the guests, the audiences, the producers, everyone just playing their part in the machine." Jimmy watched helplessly as his guest was escorted away, knowing that millions of viewers were witnessing what could potentially be a career-defining moment for both of them. The studio audience sat in stunned silence, unsure whether to applaud, boo, or simply sit quietly until someone told them what to do. As Jack reached the edge of the stage, he turned back one final time, locking eyes with Jimmy across the distance. "You know I'm right," he said, his voice now barely audible but somehow still carrying to every corner of the studio. "That's why. You're so angry. That's why you had to throw me out. Because deep down, you know I'm telling the truth." With that final accusation hanging in the air, Jack disappeared behind the curtain with the security guards, leaving Jimmy alone on the stage with a studio full of uncomfortable audience members and millions of viewers who had just witnessed something unprecedented in late-night television history. Jimmy stood there for a long moment, clearly struggling to process what had just happened and figure out how to salvage the remainder of his show. The silence stretched on until it became almost unbearable, and finally, Jimmy walked slowly back to his desk, his usual confident stride replaced by the uncertain steps of a man who had just been shaken to his core. "Well," he said finally, his voice hoarse with emotion, "that was certainly unexpected." He attempted a weak smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "We're going to take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we'll try to get back to our regularly scheduled programming." As the show cut to commercial, the studio remained eerily quiet. The audience members looked around at each other, trying to process what they had just witnessed, while the crew worked frantically to reset the stage and restore some sense of normalcy to what had become one of the most explosive moments in late-night television history. The clash between Jack Black and Jimmy Kimmel had ended, but the reverberations of that confrontation would continue long after the cameras stopped rolling. Two men had entered that stage as colleagues in the entertainment industry, but they left as something entirely different, forever changed by a moment of brutal honesty that had stripped away all pretense and revealed the raw tensions that lurk beneath the polished surface of Hollywood. So what do you think? Was Jack Black justified in his explosive confrontation, or did he cross a line that should never be crossed on live television? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Hit that subscribe button for more incredible celebrity stories, and let me know which shocking Hollywood clash you want to see covered next.